There we go. We'll just give it one more minute and then we'll begin. Uh, Jim and Steve, particularly, like obviously, I suspect we'll have a kind of a nice group size. So feel free to ask any questions into the chat as we go. Hi, Royal. Nice to meet you too. I'm Ollie. Um, we'll get started, I think, just because I know there's actually a lot to talk through. So, hi, I'm Ollie. I'm one of the founders of Count. I've been a happy Valentine's Day to you all. I've been asked to do a sort of a webinar just talking about data team impact. It's something which we're really passionate about at Count. I think it'll be a nice sized group. So I'm happy to run through this. I want to make sure we keep time, obviously. The thing on my team keep telling me is that I'm a terrible a talker. I can easily overrun, so I'll try and avoid that. But any questions that you have during the session, I would love to answer them, given that you've taken the time out to come directly. So anything which you want me to pick up on more detail, I'll make sure to do that. I'll make sure we leave time at the end for questions as well. So hoping the sort of the content side of this is actually 15 to 20 minutes or so. The goal of this topic is very much to talk to something which we often hear from our customers a lot about data team impact. So to give you some background to Count, we're kind of a relatively new company. We've been in the market with the Count Canvas for 2 years. And we have customers across Europe and the US, mostly kind of tech-enabled businesses, but a much wider range than that now. Companies like Bumble, Accenture. If you're in Europe, it'd be Too Good. Things companies like Too Good to Go, who are kind of food waste SaaS companies. Lots of people who are trying to drive impact with their data. They understand the value of data, and they often come to us because they know that as a data organization and as a business, they are not maximizing the value of their resources and the data stack they have. And so the aim of this session is to talk you through kind of the challenge that we see in the modern data stack and the data stack that exists, and how it is that data teams are struggling to drive value, and explain why we built Count to solve that problem and how that Count works. So I'll use it as a bit of an introductory session. There's a lot to this topic and to how Count works. It's a very much broader tool than most data products will be, as I'm sure you'll quickly realize. So we won't be able to go into all the depth that we could do, but hopefully gives you enough of a explanation of what the Count Canvas is and what problems it solves that you can go away and think more about doing a deeper exploration either from our website or via booking a demo. So hope that helps and sets expectations. Any questions we have during the session to more directly help you, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just gonna crack on. So I'm actually showing my screen already. This is actually the Count Canvas here. I'll explain more like the how the UI works in a moment. I'm actually going to hide these menus for the time being, just so I can talk more directly to the story. And as I said, I want to start thinking about the impact problem, as I call it, like what is going on within the data world that we are hearing from our customers. And I'm just going to talk to these slides quickly. So as you may know, there's been a understandably huge investment into the data infrastructure over the last 20 years at least, but before that, and increasingly with the idea of a modern data stack. And really what we believe is happening here is that the front of the data stack, the kind of the way that data stacks integrate with the business is lagging behind the amount of the investment that's been made in the back of the stack. Okay, Taylor? Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Keep going.
So most of our customers would use the modern data stack. They'd have an ETL system, a cloud data warehouse, maybe using dbt in some form for doing data transformation. But the front of the stack, the way that insight and value the data infrastructure gets delivered to the business hasn't really changed. They are still primarily using tools like Tableau, Looker, Power BI, which have been around for a large number of years. And the paradigm of these interfaces is that they're very dashboard orientated. And this now is becoming the blocker because they are unable to really materialize the infrastructure behind the scenes because their interface is very limiting. The way we often see this discussed is the idea of this kind of workflow. This is a very common workflow for a lot of data analysts and actually also people further up the stack like data engineers who are moving between multiple different tools, trying to communicate the workflow they're using, trying to communicate the insights that they can provide from data and having to do that via copying and pasting to spreadsheets or sharing screenshots or building dashboards, but then having to explain outside of the BI tool what's really going on. The way we like to talk about it is that actually the statistic, which is really shocking, is that from an analyst perspective, 70% of analysts spend majority of their time outside their BI tool because the BI tool itself is not delivering the value. And actually, a lot of this is down to how do data teams communicate better. That it's not about the data, it's about the way that the business works with data that is really the bottleneck, which these legacy tools are really inhibiting. So stepping back, what we think is really going on here from like a very fundamental perspective is that what's happening is that the way that data infrastructure works, the way that data teams work, is very hidden from the business. The creation of data pipelines, the insight creation process happens in a very different environment to the one where the business works, where so decision making is taking place and people are problem solving business problems. The data tool effectively acts like a wall between the data team and the business. And this wall reduces trust, it increases the waterfall development cycle, time to value, and it just turns the data team ultimately into a service function rather than being plugged in and working directly with the business on their most critical business problems. And this is true across not just analytics, it's also true in data modeling and other kind of product development processes that are happening with data products. And so this is the context by which we were looking at how do we build a better interface for the modern data stack, which allows data teams to work with the business more directly and drive greater impact. And for us, we've moved to a canvas paradigm to enable that. So if this makes sense, if you don't have any questions on this challenge, I'll love to show you why we think that the kind of collaborative canvas paradigm that we build in Count really addresses these challenges. And just to start off with, I'm going to just explain where kind of we see Count fitting in the stack. So this is a kind of a very typical kind of data stack diagram where you'll see the ETL tools we discussed earlier, the data warehousing, DBT. But what we want to talk about and what we want to explain is where most teams have a kind of BI tool as the only interface to their data warehouse. We want to argue that those kind of what we would call traditional BI tools are very limiting, as we've discussed. They are primarily designed, and their value is only really in operational reporting, providing a way for teams to access the data they need to make day-to-day decisions. They are classically called KPI reporting and self-service. They're a way for the end users to extract trusted data on a daily operational basis. That is what they are good at. They are not good at much else. So we have customers who use Count for these purposes. There's lots of solutions out there. This is basically what dashboarding is for. But this is not where data teams drive the most impact. This is just the minimum requirement of a data team to exist. This is not what makes them into a powerful force for good in an organization. That comes from use cases like storytelling, gathering requirements of the business and turning this into strategy, into data infrastructure, problem solving on business challenges like how do we reduce customer churn, how do we improve activation, doing investigative analysis to try and challenge the levers of growth, and also for defining data models with the business which actually match to the metrics the business cares about. All these tasks here are what makes a data team valuable to the business, how they can influence change, not just providing day-to-day operational support. And these workflows need a collaborative workflow to work. They require two-way communication for the impact of it to exist. And that is what we think Count is serving. This is where the Count is a value add. We call it collaborative analytics, and it's about enabling a workspace which is has a two-way communication. So how do we do that? Well, the canvas is actually far more than a whiteboard. It is a combination of a virtual whiteboard that you might be using like Lucidchart, Miro, maybe Figma. It is also a SQL editor. Customers use us as a way to do data modeling directly with DBT integrations. It is a combination of a BI tool. People are leaving us for using us instead of Tableau and Looker as their main BI tool. But it's also a data notebook at its core as well. It is a place where you can use Python and SQL interchangeably to explore data and communicate that workflow collaboratively, all within this kind of infinite collaborative canvas. So what we're trying to enable with Count is a way for all these populations of users, the business, data analysts, and central data engineers to have a common space where they can work. So between data analysts and data engineers, a common space to discuss data modeling and pipelines and scoping out and debugging data quality challenges and forming a very fast, rapid way to improve data quality. Providing a space where data analysts and business users can collaborate through metrics, through discovery, prototyping, building reports, and actually telling impactful stories in a much more flexible way. And obviously, is a place for data analysts just to work, to explore data and think through problems which they can communicate into the business and into the centralized data team. Hopefully, that makes sense. But that's a quick introduction to the concept behind the Count canvas. Let me now show you a bit more about how the canvas actually works. I'll move over here to some more space. So the way that this works, as I said, is a combination of a whiteboard, SQL editor, BI tool, and notebook. And the big paradigm here, if I bring back the UI I hit earlier, is that there are kind of two paradigms here. One is that you have the objects that you can add to the canvas, and these are things just like you'd see in a whiteboard. It's sticky notes. You can add in objects like so to sort of form a process flow diagram, maybe. We can draw even. I could draw a smiley face. I can even take screenshots from a website or a data app. Given it's Valentine's Day, let's take a quick screenshot of a Valentine's teddy bear and add that into the canvas. All the things that you need to express problems and concepts and communicate with the business, a place to think, as we say. But alongside these, what we will, qualitative information, how many data tools do you know where you can have a picture of a bear and a love heart? We also have this concept of cells, and cells are effectively data assets. Maybe if you've used Jupyter before, you'd be used to this concept of like a code block which then executes to give you a query. Cells in Cal are a bit more flexible. This one is actually a SQL cell running on a BigQuery database. You can see the blue mark here and the blue title of this cell showing where it's running. And cells are effectively, blocks of code, but they can be SQL cells. They can also be Python cells. They could be other SQL cells linked to other cells. So I could do a count star of this previous data query here. Or they could be visuals. And I can build visuals on the right-hand side here very quickly. I'll just quickly build a relatively simple bar chart for now. But the idea of cells is that they are interchangeable with each other, and they can reference the results from previous cells. So in this case, we've got a SQL query giving us the fact table. Then we're then visualizing that here with this arrow showing that relationship. We're counting these rows. You can see that this count star matches the number of rows in this result set, or we're importing into Python. But I can move, this is a Python data frame, but I can move it back to SQL if I wanted to as well. And I've got then this chain of results that are passing through the SQL. Now, if I was to make a change to the SQL, for example, I came down here and put in a limit 20, for example, you would see this change reflected in the results, but all the downstream results would also update to reflect that change upstream. So now we're seeing the count return to 20. So the question is, why is this useful? Obviously, you can write SQL, you can write Python, and in lots of different tools. One of the benefits is the fact that it's reactive, and you can obviously modularize this. But the real secret of the canvas is its ability for queries to be laid out spatially. And just quickly, I want to show this to you. I'm going to take this query here, move it up here just to get some more space. This is 159 lines of SQL. It's a kind of a data model. We've got some fact tables, some raw tables and MBA data we're converting into a fact table. And as you can mean, any UI, be that a notebook or in a SQL editor, this kind of query is really hard to understand or walk through to understand why it's broken. In Count, the idea of the cellular approach here is that you're encouraged to modularize your code for your own personal understanding and sort of cognitive load being reduced, but also to make it more explanatory. So I can split that query down into separate CTEs, which you can then see the relationships through. You can see the interim steps and the final result, and work through this with your team collaboratively. So this spatial layout just allows the complexity of this query to be suddenly understood. I can even add a post note to explain what I'm doing. Here is an assumption. For example, I can add live comments to add people to certain sections. I can even take a chunk of this query and just modularize it to the right-hand side as a way to break out the queries further. This is just one of the many benefits of a kind of two-dimensional space for dealing with complex logic. And it allows better communication, it allows more transparency to what is actually in the code that we're writing, and allows a common space for collaboration, be that between different analysts or different data team members, or trying to talk through and explain what has been built with the business so they can trust the analysis that's been made. But just stepping back even further, let's talk more about use cases and impact. So if we think about data team impact and the jobs that data teams have to do, one of them obviously is running and using creating safe data with strong data models. Then there's also the idea of providing better clarity on performance, which we would call reporting. But I want to show you how the canvas can change that. And that will link to things like metric trees, which we can cover off as well, presenting things more flexibly. And then there's just the idea of storytelling and driving impact through better communication and problem solving through the canvas. So let's tackle those three things in order. Any questions as we go, please shout. So looking at data modeling first. As you can see from this already what I've laid out here, data models, whether you've got thousands of lines of SQL, maybe between hundreds of different data models in dbt, is a really complicated thing to maintain, understand, debug, refactor. The space of the canvas allows a common collaborative place to do data modeling and to allow better communication between different teams in the business as they work through problems. And we've enabled that further with a direct integration with dbt, dbt core, dbt cloud, so that you can actually import and work within with your data models in code, in Gingified code. So this database here, for example, is connected to dbt core via a GitHub bot, and means that we can then match any branch of your GitHub repository with the dbt in it to any particular data asset in your data warehouse. And then you can choose to import your models directly into the canvas. And in this case, we can import them as Gingified SQL in the uncompiled SQL rather than just in sort of database compliant SQL. I can not only do that, I can also choose to import that model and all the upstream models that model relies upon. And I can also choose to not only import the model, but import the model where each CTE of a model is split out. Let me show you how that looks. This is now adding 16 cells into the canvas. Each of these white boxes here is a kind of a .SQL file from dbt. And then within it, you can see each cell here is effectively giving the results that individual CTE of that model is providing. And again, I can edit this in real time. I could add, again, just for simplicity's sake, a limit 20. That will then update those results. So you can see the changes cascading through. And I can even see this, what the compiled version of these macros would mean when run on the database. Any changes I make in here, I can commit directly back to GitHub with a diff to show me the changes. So this suddenly makes the canvas into the most collaborative and efficient way to work and build with dbt models that there is in the market, even more than dbt cloud. just a very quick introduction to that. But the efficiency here of the visibility, the ability to collaborate and can clarify and work with the space of the canvas really drives the efficiency around data modeling, which is obviously a core part of the way data teams drive value through trusted data. Let's quickly move on to talk about reporting. As I said, so the canvas flexibility of the canvas also allows a much broader range of ways to communicate information and data than just relying on dashboards or even like a kind of long form report. So here we've got a few different examples. My favorite one actually is this onboarding funnel. This is actually showing you in this frame here, we have a kind of a user journey through a kind of fictitious mobile app where each stage of the mobile app's interface is laid out, including this kind of fork point where there's a different flow for new and existing users. But most importantly, the numbers in here are effectively visual cells driven from this analysis, so you can understand the activity rates and conversion of each step of this funnel. Now, this is one of many ways you can differentiate between a traditional dashboarding tool, but this is actually showing 26 metrics in one report. And the contrast with having a dashboard of 26 metrics and how confusing that would be, I hope you can see the difference already. It's one of our most common use cases. And this is only one of many different ways that you can use the flexibility of the canvas to provide a different view of import, of different view of outputs and tell a story. This is actually in a frame. And anything in a frame, you can choose to present as a sort of standalone asset in what we would call the report mode. So I want to flag that the canvas does allow better collaboration, better transparency, and a way to work through the whole workflow of a building an asset, but you can still have it as an asset which can be shared independently, can be viewed by sort of hundreds of users at once in an operational sense. But what you'll be surprised to hear is that 4 out of 5 of our customers end up working with their stakeholders in the canvas because stakeholders love the ability to see the methodology of the analysis which led to a number, not just the final output. And only 1 in 5 do they want to see on an ongoing operational basis. So the power of this kind of storytelling is not just that you can present more flexibly, it's also the fact that you can share not just the numbers, the results, but the way you've got to the results, the methodology. And when you're making decisions and driving impact through decision making, this is a far more important to give trust and give confidence to the numbers you're doing, as well as allowing people to annotate and discuss what the results means with sticky notes, etc. So this is, the way you can present could be presentation led. We have lots of templates in the canvas to help you build these outputs very quickly, including like slide templates. But you can build presentations here. Here's a kind of a business review meeting for people to share live data with a customer. They've used Python and SQL cells to build out the metrics, and then they're presenting just these slides with live data in them with their clients. We've got down here an actual data model that you're presenting to stakeholders to explain the assumptions and clarify definitions and metrics. Over here, we have one of our most common use cases is a metric tree, a way of presenting your levers of growth in a way which really adds clarity and gives drill down to the performance of the business. So in this metric tree here, you're showing kind of a sort of North Star metric, be that in this case profit. But then you're able to then show what is the levers that drive this metric of profit. In this case, obviously, it's revenue and cost of goods sold. But then as you drill down further into what drives this number and you go deeper and deeper, you're starting to give a wonderful clarity into what is driving the performance of the business, a holistic picture of the business. We've had customers who have removed hundreds of dashboards from their organization because they've realized that they're the most powerful impact a data team can have is to provide real operational clarity about what the main levers are and their ability to build out that clarity with the business in a collaborative way to define those metrics and I get an understanding of the levers of growth is a hugely impactful thing for teams to do. So just to wrap up, I've shown you a huge amount of things in Count. It's a very flexible tool. We've discussed the challenges of trying to drive impact when you've got a kind of a legacy BI tool, which doesn't allow for decision making within and just designed for operation reporting rather than decision making. We've discussed the kind of paradigm of Count being a place for qualitative and quantitative information to sit together, and its power in driving efficiency in a data team via data modeling, just to let you quickly build those trusted assets, which are kind of the bedrock of any data team. But then as I've gone through, I've hoped to show you that when it comes to reporting and sort of storytelling and exploratory analysis, the canvas gives a wonderful way for a data organization to work with the business to clarify the performance and give clarity to the operating model of the business via metric trees or maybe sort of process flow diagrams of key processes, and building them out in a way which gives allows people to start answering questions and start to drill down into particular metrics, and then using the canvas to present stories which allow people to make improvements to that growth model. So very quick overview there. We've got a few minutes left over for questions, but I hope that's been a helpful introduction to why we believe a kind of more collaborative, holistic platform is a key to driving data impact in organizations. And now I'll move back to my teddy bear, given it's Valentine's Day.
Can I ask a question?
Please, Steve, yes.
Yeah, hiya. Thanks for that, Ollie. Really useful. Do you have customers that use this for external purposes, like resell it or embed it into their applications for their clients who are end users?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So we are not a embedded analytics solution right now. We have no kind of white labeling functionality. We do have a number of clients who use us for doing this kind of use case of more bespoke kind of storytelling into their businesses. So, for example, we have a kind of a SaaS company who work with some of the biggest Fortune 500 companies, and they are doing more bespoke quarterly business reviews with a kind of templated presentation that their customer success team will annotate, tell a story, but it's not designed for operational reporting in that way. That is coming in later this year when we start producing some of a client API. But right now it's designed more for bespoke projects rather than sort of like producing a kind of a white labeled view. Sorry to disappoint.
No, no, it's okay. Because one of the issues that we've got is we're processing client data, and one of the issues that we have is obviously using these traditional BI tools. It's really hard to tell the story.
Yes,
you end up
absolutely.
building these huge dashboards with a lot of repetition, rather than this would completely simplify the way you're able to do that. So I could see that would be really powerful for us, but you're not quite there, I think.
So I think for storytelling in a really bespoke way, this is definitely the best tool on the market for that. So we have a lot of consultancies using us for that use case. They use it as an internal tool to work with their clients, for example, in a project by project basis, and providing a kind of like slide deck, which is more dynamic.
Yeah.
But it's not a tool for making a story which is available to 100, thousands of people from one portal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you all so much. If there's I hope to stay around for a few minutes, but certainly we've hit time, and I appreciate you staying with us this afternoon. If there's any other questions, please feel free to follow up through our website or somewhere else. Oh, sorry, someone else asking a question. I'm happy to stay on.
I do have a couple of questions to ask, if I may. First of all, observation. This looks fantastic. I'm looking for a tool, basically. So we bring in data sets for use in our business, and at the moment we do analysis of those data sets using SQL, basically, and it is super painful. So I was looking for something like this, and this seems really useful for that. So I do have a couple of questions. First one, probably fairly easy. Is this available on-prem? Do you have if not, do you have plans?
We do have plans. So one of the things I should really clarify is we can give this on-premise. It is usually reserved for our largest clients. It's not we do that as a more bespoke service rather than a kind of a deployment option. But for most of our customers, including like Fortune 100 customers we do have, we actually find they are happy to run it where we're hosting it because of the way we run information. And this is I think, sorry, Scoop, maybe a thing to dive into in more detail later, but we don't do any computation on our servers, is the short answer. All we do is run data on your data warehouse of your choosing, and then everything else happens in the browser, in your laptop, as it were. And we don't do any computation on our servers. So that is
Yeah,
often a nuance which may be helpful.
it's yeah, it's so our data's in Snowflake, so it's the access into Snowflake that would be the issue running it like this, because we're completely whitelisted
I can understand.
for that. You know,
Yes, there are options.
ways
Yeah,
around it. Yeah,
absolutely. There are
okay.
ways around it. I think if we get into the detail, we literally work with banks who
Yeah.
use Snowflake. I'm not. We've never really had. It's a thing to take offline, perhaps, just to shortcut
Yes.
that. Yeah, we
Yeah,
have and
definitely.
we have
Well,
a new infrastructure which makes it less of a on-prem by default requirement, usually.
Yeah. Okay. I
And
do
any
have
other
some other
questions?
questions,
Yeah,
but I'm
please
happy
do.
to. I could either ask them here or have a direct session. I don't really mind. I don't want to.
No,
If
please,
anybody
let's
else have
continue
any.
now. Absolutely. I'm just anyone else can. It may be helpful for other people too. So that's really thank you for.
Okay. So a short one, which is can you version control the dashboards?
Yes,
And then I got a longer one, which is about extensibility. Okay.
you can definitely version control is an in-house version control which is
Okay,
designed for
great.
real-time working, and then we also let you, as I mentioned, push to GitHub directly as well.
Okay, perfect. And then probably the more interesting question is this a sort of programmable by us? Is it extensible? What I would like to be able to do with data sets coming in, obviously we've got the documentation beforehand, but normally that's just a very poor quality. Really, you only understand what's going on with the data set by going and looking at it. So I'd want to be able to pick a table that's sitting in a database and just run some EDA analysis on there, which may be run of the mill stuff like give me all the unique values in this thing, but maybe some more interesting things like what's the periodicity of these dates here? Do they look like they're monthly? Do they only come on Mondays? To other things like these two tables look like they could probably get joined together. Can I just click on both of them and create myself a join rather than typing a whole load of things of that raft, which you could probably guess what people want and provide them, but really you're not going to get all of the cases unless you provide a sort of API. So is that something you provide, and if not, maybe is that in the roadmap?
So that's a really good question about like repeatability and flexibility. It's also one of the tensions, of classic tension in software is like, how do I make something repeatable and also extensible? I think it's something which the canvas is really great for. So quick answer to that is by nature you have Python and SQL but natively in the product. So you have then Turing complete languages you can use to do anything you choose. We also then have obviously part of you can see that in the visualizations I showed you. You can build visuals and you can do querying in low code as well for doing and even actually in about a week and a half there'll be what we'll call a low code join cell to allow users to start doing
Okay.
joins without needing to use SQL and Python. So that's actually like literally our next release. So we have that range, the whole power of the canvas. It gives you that range of capability from someone who wants to just read the data but in a more flexible way, to someone who can then build low code, to someone who can build SQL, then Python, all the way up. When it comes to like the power of that kind of workflow of EDA, one of the things which is really powerful with Count is the fact you can obviously, you can see here when I've zoomed out, we've got about I would hesitate, but probably about 300 queries running in this canvas at once, which gives it, so you can actually, you can templatize your analysis in a canvas and then just like hook, you can basically create templates which allow you to like have a whole web of different queries running on a particular data set. And you can literally have that again and again and again. So what we find customers are using is they have like a kind of almost like a workflow, a whole workflow, be that an EDA exploratory workflow within a canvas, and they use it again and again and again, where they just drop that template into the canvas and connect to the new data set, and then quickly get an overview of it very fast. It's sort of like a data app mentality. So there are various ways we've sort of made it repeatable but also extensible. And we are going to make, as I mentioned before to Steve, over the course of the next probably three or 4 months, we'll start to release a client API, which gives you programmatic access to the canvas to then start to create queries and assets in a programmatic way as well. So it's going to get very powerful, even more powerful.
Right. Okay. Neat. And where do you run the Python? You said it's not running in your infrastructure. So if you have Python running in here, where would that be running?
So yeah, that comes back to the idea of
I'm so sorry to interrupt, guys. But I think the meeting is going to cut off in a second, so we kind of set up in the wrong version of Zoom and didn't
Okay.
move it. So I will.
No, that's fine. Sorry for taking up time.
No, absolutely not. I'm really